I just have this cozy blanket on me right now, and
I was noticing your cozy blanket, and I
have a cozy
I
blanket
wish I had a cozy blanket or a cozy chair, but if I go into my cozy situation, my brain stops working. I need like a better desk thing.
As an East Coaster, still enjoying the fact that I now live in California, I'm like, it's brisk out. It's brisk out today, so I have my cozy blanket. All right, what are we talking about?
We're supposed to be talking about reintegration, and I think part of my hesitation to talk about reintegration might just be my hesitation to reintegrate. I'm
reintegrate into what it was before, like
so many levels. Like I'm apprehensive about science and all the data. I'm apprehensive about the logistics of a lot of the reintegration things, sitting on a couple of these task forces and hearing the conversations go in circles, because it's great that the conversations are happening, but no one's expected to have answers, but no one has answers. So there are these like, and then, you know, as my inbox starts filling up again with like work stuff and the phone starts ringing about like actual real things, it's like, I feel like I just finally kind of came to terms with the transition that we were experiencing before. Mm-hmm. And now, as I've just sort of finally come to terms with that, everything's sort of, it's changing again, and not even into as it was, it's this new reality and it's another change. And I feel even whining about that. Right. But I just, it's like, if I could just get a handle on something, that would be spectacular.
What a sentence. If I could just get a handle on something.
Anything. I'll take anything.
I feel like that's the best. I mean, honestly, I just love everything about that sentence. I feel like we spend our lives trying desperately to get a handle on something, and it's never the right thing, because the something we're always trying to get a handle on is always inevitably the most impermanent thing. Yes. That we'll never be able to maintain a handle on. Do you know what I mean? Because it's like everything is constantly changing and in flux, and we're always like, yeah, this is how it is now. And then it's not like that in a little while. And it's like, yeah, it's never going to be the same. Like, it can't be. We can't evolve as a species individually or collectively. If things stay the same, we would.
And I support that, and I don't want things to stay the same, and I want the same, and I want things to evolve. But there is a part of my like my lizard brain and whatever that is just like, no change, bad, stop.
Yeah.
And
quite literally, it's like change, no, bad, stop. Yeah. Exactly. I think it even sounds like that. Like no change, bad. No. Like, no, don't do it.
But at the same time, like the other 90% of my brain is like, change, good, like innovate, come up with something new. And then at the end of the day, I am exhausted from this internal struggle, and I'm like blanky, warm, cuddle, good. Like
the good news and like horrific news all at the same time is that the only thing you can really get a handle on ever is the internal war that you have going on. Ever.
Oh, you have such a big brain.
I don't actually have a very streamlined brain. You know, I have, to be totally honest, I have the streamlined brain of like, okay, this is where we get the handle on things. Really, truly only because I have had my worlds destruct so many times in my life, where I've had to leave like an entire life that I've constructed and start over again, or an entire life that I thought I constructed was a lie. Or like just fell apart in some capacity, you know? And so consistently, and then even in like experiences like when we had the Thomas fires here in California a few years ago, for me, I had just moved here from the East Coast. I didn't know about wildfires. I knew about hurricanes. I grew up in Connecticut, so I knew about hurricanes. And then I lived in New York City during Hurricane Sandy, and I was in New York for 9/11 and stuff too. So I've had these different experiences of like destruction and then what it's like afterwards. And we all have to some extent. But I remember the fires here and just feeling like, whoa, like I think I had been here for like a year or something. And so I had just built this like incredible community, like this incredible new life after I had just had the dissolution of a relationship with where I had children and all these things. And so it was like this whole starting over. This was the community and the place that held me. Now, quite literally, everything is on fire. like literally. And there was just a point where the fires were literally, it's little sort of mountain town, and we are surrounded, the whole town is surrounded by mountains. And so we were just surrounded by fire. All of the mountains were on fire. And if the wind blew in the wrong direction, literally, it would have just ignited the whole town. So we were all evacuated for, a few weeks. Had no idea at certain nights if the fire was going to go in and destroy everything or not. And I remember this one night that it was encircled, and I ran into somebody who was evacuated with me, and she just stared at me blankly like a zombie, and she was like, do we have a town anymore? Like at that point, we weren't even concerned about our houses. We were concerned if we didn't have a town to go back to. So I feel like those experiences over time have just like accumulated to just where it's like, I have this pretty like consistent reaction now when things are all changing, of going inward and finding my own space of safety. But that has come very hard earned, and that's what I think a lot of these times are about. Yet we are in this society with this culture of getting back to normal. We talk a lot about what normal, which doesn't exist in my brain. I don't know what is normal. Like I don't know what that is. And and so we want to get back to business as usual. We want to get this like urgency to go back to the way things were, but I don't think that that's possible in these.
I don't think it's possible. I don't think it's advisable. And I don't think, I know that not everybody thinks that way. And it's unclear right now, exactly where all the chips fall on, whether it's the majority or the minority that think that way and for what reasons. And there's so many, like,
think what way?
What?
Think what way?
Think that they want to go back to business as usual versus business as usual was kind of what got us here. So maybe we should reconsider. But a lot of the people in that camp who want to reconsider for all the right reasons are financially or for other reasons are going to be forced to rejoin the workforce and to business as usual as quickly as possible for reasons of need, not reasons of want. And so it's just sort of compounding into like, the people who want business as usual might not be everybody, obviously aren't everybody, but there's a lot of people who are going to be forced into that. And how can we still try to change things? How can we still try to evolve or learn from this while being pushed back into that hamster wheel of business as usual and trying to operate in the world that will, keep the roof over our heads and put food in our fridge? And, how can you play both sides and try to keep some of the things that, you might have individually figured out or learned or thought through as a community? How do we bring that into, and to use a term that probably is the worst one ever in this situation, how do we infect the, I lost all of the words. I think the only word I could come up with.
We know what you mean. We know what you mean. Yeah. Semantics, somatics, doesn't matter.
It's all fine.
We know what you mean.
So how do we do it?
No, well, I mean, I don't know.
It was rhetorical, but like,
well, I feel like there's lots of people with lots of ideas out there, and the ideas are also they're not all awesome. There's some great ideas out there. There's lots of, opinions and thoughts on how to reemerge and all, et cetera, et cetera. But I feel like what it's going to come down to a lot of times is our ability individually to hold firm in whatever it is that we learned in this time period, whether it's about ourselves or about our society, about something like political, whatever it is that we learned, to try to really hold on to that and to ask ourselves, like, what is the underlying feeling around that? So some people are feeling a lot of anxiety about getting back to work. They might be really gung-ho about getting back to work because of the financial pressures. But underneath that, and the anger of the, you know, the shutdown to begin with for people who are in that position. And I realize that, like, and I think you and I really want to say this all the time, is like, we realize there are lots of different experiences. There are experiences that privilege allow that those without that privilege can't have. And so I know there's a lot of anger, especially around the people who don't have the privilege of simply staying home, that they have to go to work, or that they need to get back into work if things were shut down. And I would just say, like, let's all of us ask ourselves, like, questions that bring us into a deeper experience of what that is. Like, if we're angry that there's a shutdown, angry that, and therefore anxious to get back into work, there are some serious political things underneath that that aren't just about, like, shutting down, like we shouldn't be shut down. It's there's a economic inequality that is underlying, that is, like, that has created this whole situation that we're in, you know? And so I feel like some understanding why we feel the way that we feel. And then for those of us who are in a position where we don't want to go back to work because getting off that hamster wheel of stress and pressure and autopilot and go, 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 where we can never breathe and never stop, now we're off that hamster wheel. We don't want to go back into that. There are some serious questions to ask ourselves around that, and to hold really firm in those lessons as we move forward. I feel like I don't have any idea sometimes if I'm making any sense talking to you, because I'm so comfortable with you that I just blah, blah, blah. Like, I don't know what I'm saying.
It made sense to me, but I can't speak for whether or not that's going to make sense outside of this conversation. But to be fair, I rarely have any idea if I'm making sense either. And
I don't know. I just know it's really complicated, and that this whole situation has exposed a lot, and it's exposed something different for all of us. And I think the only thing that we can say super collectively is, like, what it has exposed, we need to dig into that for ourselves and see what we have to learn from that, and try not to just go back out of internal pressure, go back to the way that we were before. We might have to go back to our jobs because financially that's what we have to do. But we can choose which way we go back and what state we bring, and what, like, maybe in terms of, like, what we accept for treatment too while we're back on the jobs, you know, like, maybe just, like, panning out and looking at the overall situation and seeing, like, what has this brought up for me, and how would I, if I could move forward in any way, how would I want to move forward? And then trying to merge that with the situation that we're in, and, you know, so we can take some kind of lesson from this instead of just trying to go back to how it was before.
I'm just quiet because I super agree with you. I was trying to.
I'm like, wait, what is?
It's rare. It's rare.
No, I love.
Thanks. What I don't want, and I don't think anyone wants this, but what I really don't want is it to be a year from now or 2 years from now, or however long it takes for the majority of people who jump right back in.
Yeah.
We've forgotten all the bits and pieces from the, I mean, it's been 2 months. It's been 2 months where we have been ripped out of our lives.
Yeah.
To varying degrees. I mean, some people are working 10 times more than they were. Like, any first responder is in a completely different world than they were in 2 months ago. Some people aren't working at all. Some people are working from home. Some people are working crazy frontline jobs that, you know, that they should be making way more than they are for doing. And I'm worried that, like, 2 years from now, I mean, maybe this isn't going to happen. Maybe this worry is completely unfounded, but I'm worried that 2 years from now, we'll be back into that whatever status quo we were in prior to this, maybe with some people working very hard behind the scenes to make some significant changes, but I feel like some people isn't going to do it. I feel like collectively we need to remember how this feels right now and
Mm-hmm.
not lose sight of that as things start to look like they did
Mm-hmm.
prior to this.
Well, I feel like the only way to do that is to not just intellectually know what this feels like, but to assimilate that experience through all of the layers of our being. Because what happens is, I think too often we sort of contract in times of trauma and times of challenge, and we don't, because we're trying to keep ourselves from feeling the gravity of everything that we're experiencing right now, we keep ourselves a little dissociated from it, or a little bit in anxiety, or a lot of it. And we don't necessarily have built the capacity to sit in the destruction that we are feeling, whether that's the destruction of what we've known or the destruction of our egos or whatever the heck it is. If we don't do that, then we might have an intellectual understanding that this is a hard time. But that's super, super easy to then like just get rid of as you move forward with enough time, because you didn't assimilate the experience. So I would say like we need to assimilate this experience right now.
This might be off topic, but two things just popped into my head. One was, as you said, trauma. I was like, oh yeah, we're supposed to be talking about trauma, creativity, and productivity. By the way, I completely lost track of that because I just enjoyed talking to you. And
I should just call this the talk with no title.
talk with the title. And the second thing that made me think of, what you were saying is, I was talking to someone within the last week who had seen that we were posting videos. And this is the only person I've had this conversation with. And so this might be broader than I know, but I'm just speaking from one experience. And this person said to me, why are you doing videos about trauma? And I said, because of what's going on right now. And they said, I don't understand. And so because it's traumatic, and we started talking, blah, blah, blah. I gave her the 10-second history on it. And she definitely didn't understand why we felt the need to have these conversations.
Right.
So I'm constantly reminded that whether I chose it or not, I exist in somewhat of a bubble of people who think like me.
Right.
To certain extents. There are obviously, outer edges of that, and I interact with all kinds of people all the time.
Right.
As far as people that I really talk to, that I really interact with, they primarily, and I think everyone sort of gravitates towards folks who have similar mindsets. So in all of this, I'm constantly reminded that this is my experiences and my perspectives, and even, talking to you on the other side of the country is still just an extension of my bubble. And so I think my worry comes from the fact that I keep acknowledging, that this might be a minority feeling. This might not.
Right.
There is a chance that how you and I feel about all this, and about internalizing it, and about, sitting with it and learning from it, this may not be a prevailing feeling. And that's, I think, why I'm worried that, like, a small handful of people who really want to learn from this, and by small handful, it's hyperbole. I know it's a larger handful, but a small handful of people really want to learn from this versus a disproportionately large amount of people who just want to pretend it never happened.
Yeah. I mean, that's usually the case. And I feel like there's not much to do about that, because you'll never convince somebody who doesn't want to go in and do that deeper, very difficult work to do it. There has to be like a humility and an openness and some type of availability for that. And it really doesn't have to be, and I'm saying this acknowledging my privilege and acknowledging like that I understand the situation that allows me to say this, and I'm going to cautiously say it, but it doesn't no matter what your situation is, like it doesn't take, you don't need to have a certain privilege in order to sit and do that work. And I would even argue that those with the most privilege are less likely to do the real work, because they don't have that crucible forcing them to do it. And I would say that there is an opportunity in this that, again, I say with a lot of caution, because for so many obvious reasons, I say this with a lot of caution, but this situation has exposed a huge inequality that we did already know was there, but it's really putting it in our faces. The people who are dying are disproportionately African American and Latino. And the people who are home, like you and me, are able to be home because of workers who deliver our stuff and because of the laborers that are doing the work, the essential work. A lot of our essential workers are not even given legal documentation. So they're considered essential, but yet they're considered illegal at the same time. It's so wrong in so many ways. In my experience, the deepest work has always come from, personally, from my own experience and then what I've seen in others. The most deep work that I've ever seen done is done from such a place of like that raw humility and almost like a disillusionment with whatever everything you felt was, you know what I mean? Like a deep disillusionment. So those people who are in more of a privileged situation might not have the components that make them sit there and sit in the pain of what this is that would actually lead to transformation. But they might not even, I mean, I hope that that would happen, because there's a lot of people within that hold the power to resources and to all sorts of things that would allow transformation, real social transformation to happen. But in the absence of that, there's a lot of us that can sit in that humility, and a lot of people who are being really pushed to the brink right now, who are really, the way in which they are used and exploited is really come to the surface. And if anybody can really cultivate what their voice is around that and start speaking and start demanding something different, I don't know how that looks. Like, I realize, like, this is slightly like saying let's like have a revolution or something, but it on some level, like, it's going to take everybody going into that place and just saying, like, the way things were is not okay, you know, and like we don't want to go back there for that reason. And it's going to take a lot of the people who are sitting in the pain of all of this to start finding what that voice is and go underneath the anger, underneath the dissociation, and try to find something that we can each stand in that would move something forward. I know I'm speaking in sort of these large platitudes as well, but
no, I
this
think
is where I'm at today. I don't know. This is where I'm at today. Like any given day, I feel like some days I have to talk more about trauma, and today I'm just like, I don't know.
I know.
Yeah,
it's been a long day. But I think that there are a couple of things you just said that are really, really important. I mean, everything you say is really, really important, Taryn. But, you know, so first of all, acknowledging the privilege. I mean, you and I have talked offline or unrecorded at length about the fact that I've been uncomfortable in the first place about some elements of airing these conversations, because I know that I'm speaking from a place of privilege with a roof over my head and food in my fridge.
Yeah.
So I acknowledge that, but then I also feel on some level that it's still not enough, but I do want to keep having these conversations. But then what you just said made me realize or process that maybe the thing that those of us that are privileged enough to have these conversations and to have them in with four walls around us and food in our fridge, maybe what we can do is be the catalyst that keeps these conversations going on the other side of this.
Yeah.
And we have the privilege to speak. We have the privilege to be heard. We have, most of us who are sitting and stuck at home right now, whether they like it or not, have internet connections and have the ability to even just write things down and use that use the spoken word, use the narrative, use everything, use their art, use their creativity to keep these conversations going, especially on behalf of the folks that we love and we sympathize with who can't, because they're up to their eyeballs keeping our communities and our societies functioning right now.
Yeah, and that could even translate into like, what is the responsibility of a small business owner right now? Like, are there ways that we can pivot what we were doing to better support the collective? I mean, some of these things, like, we're going to have so much more homelessness, and we have so many more issues now, in part because of the way that wages are dealt, and the way that, and you have like a lot of, single parents who are not going to be able to recover from this. I mean, I feel like, or it will take a long time to recover from it. There's a disparity that's woven into our economic framework. And so potentially, how can we, on an individual level, as small business owners, shift that in some way? I don't have, for example, in my small business, it's really essentially me and like one or two freelancers. I don't have it's not a large enough business that I don't have that kind of business, where I hire lots and lots of people, nor would I have the work for them to do. But what I can do is I can pivot the purpose of my business, and I can start to look at like, okay, how can I take what I do in terms of trauma healing, and how can I help pivot, how can I pivot this work so that it supports the collective in a bigger way, and it supports some healing that potentially we need in a larger perspective, right? That's unique to my business, but I know your business has certain opportunity to potentially pivot in ways that can support the collective as well, right? So it's like, and I'm not saying that I even have necessarily the answer to what that is for me, or you have the answer to what that is for you, but maybe there's small ways that we can be contributing also to a better situation. And that might sound very idealistic, but that's part of not going back to business as usual, when business as usual was not working on so many levels for so many people. Like, I think it's just like, what can we do? But really, what can we do? And I mean, like, not posting another freaking, and I'm just laughing because I'm totally posting this to social media, but not posting another like armchair activist like thing where we like post our like huffy puffiness over things and then just go back to like our Netflix, like, it's just like, you're just preaching to the choir. It doesn't do anything. Like, what can you actually do? Like, I don't know. I feel like we need to start asking ourselves deeper questions and like looking into like, well, why don't we want to go back? What was not right for us before? Or how do we feel about being stuck going back? How do we feel about the situation that we're in? Like, again, this is like where I'm at today, where I'm just kind of like hands up in the air, like,
I know. And I know
like, that's just how I feel right now.
Why I almost said, let's not do this call, because I was
I was like, I don't know. I don't know.
Meetings and phone calls, and then I saw this come up on my calendar as the next thing to do, and I was like, I don't have any answers.
I don't know. I mean, I think that we could do a part 2. And in part 2, I'm happy to talk about why internally, from a somatic perspective, it is hard for us to hold that tension of change. And why is it hard for us to go into the unknown? We could talk about that. But I just feel like
totally reasonable.
Talk about some of this stuff first, because I mean, we're in the midst of looking at a whole bunch of bullshit. That's what we're seeing, like a whole bunch of bullshit. And no matter what side you're on, you're seeing some bullshit, guarantee it. So what we need to do something. This is like not, and also I'm just going to say this. I don't even know, even if like 2 people watch this video, I'm going to say this. We need to be firm in resisting the gaslighting that is absolutely going to happen and is already happening on a massive scale. Like, we cannot let that happen, because part of why we forget the lessons that we learned is not just because we didn't assimilate that lesson, but because we will believe anything to feel better. We do not, as a human species, like feeling not good. We don't like feeling uncomfortable. We don't like feeling anything less than awesome. Every like advertisements, like the psychology behind all ads, marketing, etc., is to like play to that, you know.
I have such a good book on that I'm reading right now.
Oh my God, please send me the link. You know that. I was also going to ask you if you wanted to. I was actually going to ask you if you wanted to do a book club thingy with me. That's just you and me. But I knew when I saw that in your thing that I wanted. Okay, yeah, exactly. Read books like this, and this is the one I wanted to see if you wanted to read with me.
Ooh.
Yeah. So let us not be deceived by others, and let us not deceive ourselves. Wait, hold on. Oh, I thought I had. Wait, here it is. Wait, hold on. Bianca. Anyway, I just wanted to say, let's not be deceived by our own selves or by others simply because it is more comfortable to believe the deception. It will always be more comfortable to believe that deception.
I feel like that should be written on my non-existent tombstone.
Perfect. Well, good news is one day you are going to die, so you'll have a tombstone on one day. So.
It's going to be scattered into the breeze. Okay.
It'll be on a little card that goes off in the biodegrades anyway. But that also is a good point, is that this has probably brought us all pretty close to our mortality, which we also can deceive ourselves from and hide from, and not do the work that we really need to be doing on an inner level and an outer level, because we just stay sort of dissociated from the reality of our mortality, and the reality of what we are living in. And let's just not do that. It's going to mean something different for everybody. And I think that's where you and I get stuck, is like, we want to have these conversations, but we really
we don't want to generalize, but you have to generalize.
So we're going to speak as in the situations that we're in. We have a certain privilege. We're going to speak as that. And we're going to do our best to acknowledge that we are aware that this is not the only situation, but if we could try to take some of the principles that we talk about, because everyone's going to have a different thing that they're reflecting upon. And if you just keep going deeper and deeper and you get underneath to the underlying truth, not just the truth of the emotion, because the emotions are often the symptom of something much deeper and something much more important. The emotions are fleeting, and they can sometimes be a way that we stay dissociated from the depth of what we're really experiencing. For instance, anger. Anger is an energy of mobility. It's the energy of wanting to act. So if we can't act, we will freak out sometimes, right? But there's something that we actually want to act upon that's really, really important. So going deeper in always, I think, that's a good generalization. What you find there will be individual. But yeah.
I utterly lost track of time, so I'm going to pretend that we are on time to stop this one.
Yep. Yeah, I think so. It's been about exactly the time that you wanted it to be.
Like on every level, I feel like I have failed us today.
Oh, I like this. This is my favorite conversation. I don't know what the hell I said, but I liked it. It was enjoyable with you. Thank you. I have my cozy blanket on still.
All right, so we're gonna call it, and we will be back next time with really deep and productive things to say.
Maybe other people, if anyone watches, can tell us what they would like us to talk about.
That would be
somebody else give us direction. How about that?
That would be welcome, because we should not be left unsupervised. This is.
I thought you were my supervisor.
You were my supervisor.
Oh shit! No wonder. Okay, all right. We gotta talk.
What was that book about communication? All right. Okay. All right. I have to call it. Time out.
Okay, it's over. Bye, everybody.